Yay!
Welcome to the Professional Fan Podcast, your home for all things fan life. This week, we're discussing what the professional fan means to us. I think for me, being a professional fan, um, there's a moment where I sort of feel like I crossed over. I've been in the fandom life for as young as I can remember. I literally, and sorry, mum and dad, by the way, but at about 7 years old, I was left. With backs turned in a laptop and I signed up for Twitter using my mum's birthday instead of mine. So I've always been involved in fan life, but at some point I used fandom and experiences I had with music to explore jobs that related to music. So I studied creative marketing. I've been doing photography since 2020 with the aim of getting into music photography. And that's sort of the difference, I think, is there are people who are fans and it's sort of like what they are interested in. And there are people who are fans who make it their job.
I'm the same in a sense of, I'm older than you, so I had access to things at a slightly different age, but I was on Stan Twitter from a very young age, mostly to do with One Direction initially, because I was following them on X Factor in 2010, and I think that was when I first made like a fan account as such. And now my fan account, there's just so much history to it now, but like, yeah, I studied a lot of creative things in secondary school for my GCSEs. I studied photography at the time when I didn't know that was something I wanted to do. I just wanted to be creative, so I picked like all of the creative subjects. And then in college, I did media studies, which was a little bit more specific than just like generally creative. It was more about like music videos and TV and film and kind of just general media and sound and whatnot. And then I niched it even more when I went to university and studied live event management, where I then studied how to run tours, put on festivals, do shows, do the logistics of things, book artists, all of these like massive things that go into putting on a good show. Um, Ultimately, all because I really enjoyed music and have for a very, very long time. And I've been doing photography since maybe 2020, maybe 2021. I can't remember. I used to always want to take photos and never really had the courage to like actually do it. So I was working on my writing for a little bit and an opportunity came by me and I took it and I ran with it and now here I am. But so yeah, I've kind of always known it's been like inevitable for me as a fangirl to want to do it in a professional way.
I remember sitting in the classroom and it was subject selection day. And they have a list of every subject and where it leads to in a career. And I crossed out every last thing and I said, I'm not doing any of this because the only thing I'm good at is loving music. Um, because you end up like one on one with a career advisor. I didn't want to do English. I didn't mind doing English, but I was like, I don't know where that leads. I was bad at math, hated science, didn't understand it. I struggled all throughout school, but the one consistent thing was um, I actually used to wear hearing aids. I don't anymore. But I used to, because I had Bluetooth ones, I'd connect them to my phone and I would pretend I couldn't hear the teacher, but I always had. It was almost always Five Stars, Taylor Swift, and One Direction, with the occasional little bit of someone else. I was known as the kid who didn't really talk to anyone, but if you mentioned a song I liked, I'd sit there and talk to you for hours about it. So I always knew that was something I wanted to explore. Um, I also remember we had a multicultural day and we all had to volunteer to do a job. And I literally informed my teachers, I said, I'm not volunteering for any job unless you let me stand there all day with my camera and take photos. They actually still use my photos to this day for promotional reasons. And I took those photos in 2020. So pretty impressed that they still use those photos. Yeah. But I I think music is also something that like culturally in New Zealand has been a big thing. So I'm not surprised that it connects so many of us. Um, but it was literally the only language I spoke for so long, which is why I wanted to make it my thing.
I do, off of the back of like cultural impact of music, I do think the UK is one of those markets that artists find it really hard to break for some reason. I don't know why, because I live here, so I'm like it's just around me all the time. But I know a lot of international artists really want to break the UK and break the US, and I don't know the ins and outs of to as to why, but I think just kind of having that just constantly kind of in the background whenever I'd like work with artists or go and see artists live or whatever, I'm like, wow, they really like either they or their label or whoever really wanted them to do something here because the UK does have that market and does have that kind of reach in terms of sales and charting and whatever. Like if you've made it big in London, you're that's a pretty damn good thing. Um, but I've always known as well that I've always been quite like politically switched on. Um, and I've always noticed when there's been big gaps of demographics in things. So I've noticed for a very, very long time that the music is very white, male, straight, heavy. So I was like, I kind of want to just kind of insert myself in there just to prove that I can. Whereas like I could go down a stereotypical like girly job route that is female dominated or white dominated and all of those things, which is like, yeah, I could have done that. I could have gone into beauty, I could have gone into fashion, I could have gone into these different fields because they are also creative fields. But I saw a male dominated industry and went, that kind of annoys me. I want to be in that.
And I think what you're saying is also really interesting because that is something that when I started this magazine, I noticed a lot of. It was something I had in mind. Um, I really wanted to highlight rural voices because that's something that doesn't get highlighted in a lot of mainstream New Zealand media, even though so much of New Zealand is like rural and farming and stuff. You don't, that's somehow not what gets portrayed to the greater audiences. So I wanted to highlight that. On top of that, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of up and coming New Zealand female artists, which has been amazing because I didn't know we had that many, to be honest. And that really it's a weird thing for me to say as someone who has been so tapped in and watching a lot of different acts. I genuinely had not heard most of these names until they were presented to me. Um, and the cultural thing is still quite a big thing for me because even though if you were to walk down any street, pretty much anywhere in New Zealand, there are some places not so much, but pretty much anywhere in New Zealand, we are not actually a predominantly white country. We are so very mixed. We have a lot of Polynesian people. We actually, despite the fact that some people higher up trying to raise this fact, we have a lot of Maori people. It is one of our main languages. And yet, when you look at New Zealand music, the Polynesian cultures and the Maori language is not so heavily um, promoted, I guess would be the right word. You see the same few people and sounds. Um, I I always set out to change the focus. Um, at first, it was with my photography. I was like, I want to literally have people who wouldn't usually be in focus, pun intended, um, be the highlight so that people would be like, oh, who is this person? I'll go and check them out. And eventually I realized that there was more than just photography that I could do that with. I could do that with graphic design. I could do that with my writing. I could do that with my literal voice.
Yeah, I've got even a few friends over the years that I've met from like being on Stan Twitter, like one of my best friends. She's fantastic. She's a little bit younger than me. She's a brilliant black woman, but she's a DJ, which again, even she, with her roots in Stan Twitter as well, that's how we met. She saw the same music industry, and even in her field, being a DJ, she was like, there's just a lot of white guys. And she's gone out to, again, like you said, shift the focus. And I think that's brilliant because she's managed to get herself booked in some of the biggest UK festivals ever just because she has that uniqueness that is harder to come across just by her existing and doing what she loves, which I think is crazy. Like there's nothing actually like she just DJs, which is a skill, obviously, but it's no different than what every other DJ does. But because she has a different background and because she has a different way of that she's grown up in a different family and a different heritage and whatnot, she's being given these opportunities, which puts her on a platform, which I think is fantastic because then other little black girls are going to look up at her and go, "Oh my God, I can do that. If she can do that, I can do that." And I think that's what's really important. Like myself as a bisexual woman in the industry, that's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on not only the woman part of me wanting to like infiltrate the music industry from the inside out, but the bisexual part of me, I want other queer people to realize that it can be done. And I know that I'm saying that from a place of privilege, whilst I'm a white person, but I want young girls to look up at me and say, oh my God, if she can do it, I can do it. And I want, either closeted people or young queer people who are out to be like, oh my God, that is something I could do because it is so straight and male.
I know that even though I have 10% Maori blood, I look very, very white. But I do know that so much of me growing up, I mean, if you think about TV, what were the accents? They were never Kiwi. In fact, if there was a Kiwi character, they were the butt of every joke. Every single joke was, oh, I can't understand you. As a young kid, you do kind of go, oh, okay, if I ever went into any industry that isn't right here where I live, people wouldn't understand me. I mean, I remember, because I've joined a lot of creative communities online. Um, that I have, as a Kiwi woman, been the butt of a lot of jokes. It's been things from, oh, you don't understand city life because you live with like all of the sheep poo, or how many hobbits do you see on the daily and stuff like that. I think a lot of people think that New Zealand is a film set rather than a place to take seriously. Um,
Mhm.
there's also sort of when I talk to other young Kiwis, whether they are teenagers or in their early 20s, a lot of them don't think that Kiwis can go on to do something bigger than the small pond we have. Whether that's I can't move to LA because people won't understand me and take me seriously. I can't move to another country and or I can't do this online thing because I'm just some Kiwi that the algorithm's not going to push out. I wanted to challenge that as well because there's a part of me that from as young as I can remember, I would literally force it on people in school. I wanted everyone to be equal, and if there was some injustice in any sort of situation, I would get so upset. Like so upset that it would become everyone's problem, sort of upset. I I pushed that down for a lot of years, and eventually I was like, no, no, I still want that. I'm not going to push that down, and I want to highlight any voice that comes across, any voice that may not otherwise have a platform. Within reason, though, I will say, there are some people who send messages who you're not going to get a second of our time if you're not respectful. Um, but if you have a decent message behind you, I want to be able to tell that story.
Oh yeah, there's absolutely people that in my head I have on a blacklist that I just would never ever work with. Obviously, they're massive names, and like the chance of me ever working with them anyway was so slim. But I'm going to use Chris Brown as an example.
Yeah.
I hate the guy. I think he's disgusting. I don't know how he's got away with everything he's got away with. I don't know how he still has a platform and whatever, but should the opportunity ever present itself that someone goes, I want you to work on Chris Brown's tour, I'll go, ugh,
Yeah.
because that's disgusting. And I don't understand the people that like throw away their morals for an opportunity. Yes, it would be a great opportunity. You can't deny that. That is a massive name. That would be a big tour. You'd get good money, whatever. Like, it would be a fantastic opportunity. But your morals should always come first because you're going to get better opportunities when you stand on your business and you make yourself like a reliable person for the communities you want to be reliable to. Like if I sat here and was like, I want to be, you know, a light for young queer girls, and then I go and work with someone who beats women,
Right.
what message does that send to the people who then watch me and like look at my art and they go, that's kind of everything backwards and that she said she stood for? And it's like, I just, that's obviously a very extreme example, but that is what I mean is I just think that your morals and like your standards and what you stand for and what you want to put out into the world should always be first. It
Yeah.
should just what you want to do should be what you want to do, not because someone's waved some money in your face and gone, yeah, but look how much I'll pay you if you do something bad. And it's like, okay, I don't want to do the bad thing though.
I do believe a lot of stories have to be told, but there are some in relation to some topics with love that I just can't cover. Um, because I know my audience is a lot younger than a lot of other audiences, and I do feel a duty to sort of not throw a lot of subjects in their face that maybe that at least I feel they don't need to hear about just yet. So I get what you mean because yes, there are times where I go, am I being too overprotective of myself or my audience? But then I think you have to be because if you aren't standing behind the message you have, then people notice that and people are like, she's inconsistent or this doesn't make sense to what I thought your values were, what I thought I connected with you on. Um, you have to remember why you're doing this, you know. Who are you doing it for? Why are you doing this? And if you're willing to lose sight of that, people aren't going to show up. A lot of young fans have messaged or reached out, emailed, whatever. Um, they've said, I'm also a fan, and I also really want to support musicians as my job. What did you do? What skills did you have that translated to a job in the industry?
I don't really know because I've been chasing it for so long. Like I studied it in school and then studied it in college and then studied it in university. It was very much just like a passion project. I literally went online one day and just went, that looks kind of cool. And then kind of gave it a go and then just kept giving it a go until I was able to like prove because obviously you're never going to get it perfect on your first time. You're not going to be able to pick up a camera, get in a photo pit of an arena and then go, yay, look, I just photographed my favorite artist. It doesn't happen like that. But what you can do is if you have that passion, if you have that little fire and you go, yeah, I want to do that, you go to your little local venues and you go, look, I don't expect you to pay me, but I want to build a portfolio and I would love if I could photograph this gig or this comedy event or this play or this theatre thing or this speech or this talk or whatever it is. It's really, it is really just try and try again, even if you will get a million no's. Like that's inevitable. But it's about learning to not take it personally. They're not saying, no, I think your work is god awful. I don't want to hire you. They're just probably saying, no, it's not within the budget, or no, we already have someone, or no, we just don't need it, whatever it is. It's not like a personal attack to you. And it's really just a case of like looking at it and acknowledging it and going, yeah, I want to do that. And oh, okay, yeah, I want to do that again. Until eventually you build up a little bit of a portfolio and you build your skills a little bit, and then you go and it just not tumbleweeds, snowballs into something bigger. But like it really, I wouldn't say I had any like skills as such. Like it wasn't really anything that I sat down and really went, this is what I want to do, and this is what I need to do to get there, and this is what I need to study to do it. I just went, this is what I want to do, so let me just give it a go. Let me just try it and play with some buttons and learn how to edit. And it was very self-taught for me. Even the writing, I when I was practicing my writing, I was told to do press reviews and like album reviews and stuff. I didn't have any like journalism skills or anything before that. I just honestly wrote down how I felt about an album, or how I felt about a press rollout, or how I felt about a single, wrote about it, sent it to an editor, they would give me feedback, and then from that feedback I would develop it a little bit each time.
That's why I was really interested to hear your answer, because I've struggled to answer this question myself. For me, I don't think I had set skills. I think, again, I was in fandom from such an early age, and I had these little things I did that would translate into study. For example, this is nobody go and find this. It was years ago, and I have deactivated most accounts. But in high school, um, I was really good at writing, but I struggled with reading. Um, because of the fact I didn't know it at the time, but I have this weird thing where I don't see pure white, which of course paper is pure white. I see color dragged out across the page. So I literally had like a blob of color right where I was trying to read the words, and I couldn't read it. But with screens, you can change the color of it. Especially here we go, Wattpad, where you could make it a brown or a black background, and you can change the color of the words too. So literally for my English assessments for NCEA, I read Wattpad stories, I wrote Wattpad stories, and that's how I passed. I actually did pretty good. I have an excellence endorsement for level two. I think level three, but can't remember. I studied media studies online because there was some other class. I think you had an option of three different science classes during that block. Um,
Mhm.
I didn't take science past year nine, um, because my class actually got kicked out due to some person who decided to run their own experiment, which wasn't me, but unfortunately it was the group I was in, so we all got kicked out of science in year nine, um, which is why I don't understand anything to do with science. So I said to the teachers, I was like, I don't want an extra study period. I want to do something with that time. And they were like, well, we don't offer any courses. We're a small rural school. And I said, all right, I'll go and find something online. I found media studies. So I actually have studied a bit of journalism. I studied film. Um, I was someone who took what I was already interested in and found courses online. I took psychology randomly for a year, um, which again wasn't even offered in my school. I found it, studied it, but I studied creative psychology and music psychology. Um, this might shock a lot of people, but I actually at one point wanted to be a creative therapist. Um, and I also was trying to look at what part of the brain, because my mum's a nurse, and a lot of people tried to ask me like, "Oh, will you go into something sort of medical?" And I was like, "I have no interest in what mum's doing." But I thought I could get into medical research, and I was looking at what effect music had on the brain. I did a lot of study on how music affects people with Alzheimer's, how it affects like people who actually can't hear the music who are deaf, but how those vibrations still can get through to them. Um, because you can still feel music even if you can't hear it. Did a lot of studies on that. Um, so I always knew that music had the power to heal and the power to connect. And I knew I wanted to somehow use that power of music to help people. Um, I think I always thought, however, that because I grew up hard of hearing and couldn't make the music myself, I wouldn't work in the industry. Um, so every day I wake up so surprised that this is actually my life.
Yeah, I think when I studied media studies in college, that was more when I went into that course, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I know I want to be in the music industry somehow. I don't know what. At the time, I wanted to be a radio host, and I went into that, and a lot of the course was like freeze framing, motion picture, radio, interviews, music videos, TV, film, scoring, all of these things that then ultimately had nothing to do with what I want to do, which is concept photography, right? So, yes, you could argue that like I have the skills because I studied photography and I studied media studies and I studied live event management, but none of those things actually had, as even with photography going way back into secondary school, that was all like not sports photography, that was all like nature photography and macro photography and like studying the history of photography rather than actually doing the photography. Like it was studying old timey cameras and old timey photographers and the history of how it all came about and these new editing platforms and stuff. It wasn't actually a whole lot to do with how to take a good photo. Um, so yeah, you could argue that I have the skills because I go way back in terms of what I've studied, but none of it had anything to do with actually what I wanted to do. That was really wholly just me going, that looks like fun, I'm going to try that. And then I just kept trying it until I got it right because it was something I thought looked fun and it was something that even when I was getting it wrong, I was still like, this is actually really fun for me, even though I've just deleted 200 photos from this show and I've only got 10 that are fine. That's 10 that I wouldn't have if I didn't try.
I actually just remembered this, but I also didn't start with concert photography many years ago. And this is something I might have to explain because anyone not in New Zealand may not know what this is. But we have a place in Wellington called Wisher Workshop. They've done a lot of films and stuff. There's Wisher Workshop and there's Weta Digital. And I always wanted to work with Wisher Digital in some way. But the last year that we lived in Wellington before we moved to be closer with granddad and stuff, my parents decided to have this school holidays period, which was a staycation. So we went to all of the iconic places in Wellington, one of which was Weta Workshop, and they paid for the big tours, like all of the tours. So we did Thunderbirds, we did everything. Um, and there was a workshop in there where they taught us how to make fake blood. And I've got really into like special effects makeup and stuff. Um, for someone who does her makeup and it's pretty average, it's hilarious the fact that I did actually do special effects makeup. I turned up at the local high school and I was already the weird city girl. I remember I went to my first party and I was dressed way too crazy, crazy makeup. Everyone's like, who is she? Weird. Um, so I was a theatre kid, so I took some of the kids who were also in my group, and I was like, "Hey, I want to do a photo shoot. I've got this crazy concept. Are you down?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're down." I I had a jar of fake blood. I had all of my makeup laid out. I gave them fake bruises. I dripped the blood on them. Um, and I remember we got into a bit of trouble because unfortunately it was super hyper realistic fake blood that someone thought I was literally walking around school with a jar of real blood, which was I literally got called in to be interrogated about my jar of fake blood, but I for some reason was really into recreating historic moments. Um, so in performing arts, we were learning about different angles of the war, different stories that were not so well known. Um, and we had to write our own script based on the Second World War. So I took that script and I took those characters and I turned it into a photo shoot that could sort of work alongside it, where we acted out different scenes and I took some photos, and they are probably still some of the strongest photos. I don't have them posted anywhere because they are they will stop you and make you react. Um, and I just don't think that relates to what I do anymore. But I do remember during that photo shoot, um, looking at how realistic the makeup is, looking at how well I could tell the story, and sort of wanting to go down that route, which I laugh at because I have a coordination disorder. I was not good at makeup. I think it looked realistic enough, but the bruises were all slightly wonky. The fake blood was dripping on people's faces. Um, but I don't think it's so much about a set skill. I think it's about being so true to yourself that people have to show up, people have to take that seriously because that's who you are. That's some people just naturally are creative, some people aren't. Like you've got your friend where if you look in your friend group, this one's the friend who's good at baking, this one's the friend who's that. Everyone has their set vibe. Um, but you can't force that because I do sometimes come across fans who really want to just do something and they kind of force it. They're not creative. I think if you give it a try, cool. But please, because I have seen so much of this lately, please actually give it a try. Please don't go, I want to promote my favorite artist. I have not a single creative bone in my body. I'm going to use AI. That pains me. The other thing that I have seen recently, and I'm sorry if this shakes some feathers, but I don't believe this is photography. Taking photos of a screen, putting up a music video, pulling up a live event, and taking photos of the screen and saying, I took photos of this musician. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
On that note, on a tangent on that, I also don't believe photography is you with your phone going, look at my photography of this artist. Yeah, you've taken a photo on your phone, but that's not, in my head, photography is like the skill of all of it, like together. It's the camera, it's the editing, it's the filtering through photos, it's all of it. It's not just tapping one button on your phone that automatically sets the settings and automatically edits for you. That's just taking a photo on your phone. Anyone can do that at any moment in any point of life. You going to a concert and you're like way back in the pit and you've taken a photo of Callum Hood on stage and you've gone, oh my god, I'm a photographer. No, you're not. You're a fan who's taken a photo, like every other fan in that building.
I think like there are fans who haven't had a press pass, but they've shown up in the pit with their point and shoot. And you can get some point and shoots where you can change the settings. You can be quite creative. That that I love because that's sort of the taster of, oh, maybe I really want to do this. Um, but yes, it does pain me when a young person messages me and goes, "Hey, like, look at my concert photography and like, can you give me some advice?" And it's very clearly iPhone shots that they've put a weird filter on to distract from the fact that not even their full face is in focus. Um, I can't judge too much because I know I have been that person. I know I was the person who was like, I want to get into concert photography, but I don't have a camera, so I'm just going to use my phone for now. But I also know that I didn't go around saying that was concert photography. I would knew that eventually I wanted to get into it.
Like recently, and I still am currently posting all of my photos that I took of Five Sauce on their recent tour. One, they were taken on a point and shoot. Two, I clarify that in the caption. I say shot from the crowd. I wouldn't be able to get the photos I've got on my camera on my phone. That's not happening. Some of the photos I've gotten are so like crisp. I don't even know how I did it. But and then like people are eating it up. People are like, "Oh my God, these photos are so good." And I thank you, thank you. I know some of them are quite good and I really enjoy some of my own photos and thank you for like the fantastic feedback. Now imagine if I could get a press pass and go with my actual camera. You can see that jump from point and shoot to actual press pass because it's like, oh, you can take these photos on a point and shoot. You must be like actually quite good at what you do.
To any young person out there, please consider your branding if you ever decide to do something like this, or else you'll be standing there in a new town talking about your job. Everyone's talking about what they're doing. Oh, what do you do for a job? Oh, I own and I run the Groovy Moo. The what? Moo, as in cow. And you'll be standing there in a busy, busy church just going moo, moo, moo over and over again because they're like moon or they can't figure out what you're saying, so you're standing there going moo moo moo. Or you'll interview your
That's
favorite artist with a cow's butt behind you.
mine.
PSA.
Mine is my government name. Half of my government doesn't have my surname in it. It's Toy Around Photography. That's my name on what I do. That's my branding. My logo is Toy Around Photography in a camera, just in case you can't read the word photography, there's a visual cue. You know, it's just it does what it says on the tin. I'm Toy Around and I take photos. Like,
Be smart. Don't do what I did. Because um, I remember actually, because the check went bad, I ended up with no background. But there was that moment where I was sitting there waiting to interview Callum Hood, and I looked at my virtual background, which was um, a cow behind me. And at that point, I was still drawing them on all four legs. I switched to drawing them on two legs. For the reason that, um, because of how I was sitting like this, you had the butt about there behind me. And so all you could see was a cow butt and the word groovy moo above my head. And I was just like, this is not how I want to be interviewing Callum Hood. Um, just, he's one of my favorite musicians. That was just not how I wanted to come across. I'm like, that is embarrassing. Um, so careful is my advice. But also, I think you do need to be a little bit weird and random because the name has stopped a few people. Um, how often do you get an email going, Kiora, we're the Groovy Moo and we'd like to interview you? People are like, the what now? The huh? You, um, so I do think be original but be yourself and be aware of the fact that there's just a certain amount of public embarrassment that comes with this industry.
and be consistent.
Yes.
Because if you're chopping and changing the name of your brand every month, people are going to forget about you. Which is why I've kept mine so simple as like my name and photography, Toya and photography, because my website is that, my usernames are that. If my username isn't Toya and photography, it's Toya Ann. Like I'm so easy to find across social medias. Should anyone like see my watermark on a photo and go, oh, I wonder who that is, then they can search it and I'm there. Rather than like, oh, 1 month I'm Toya and photography, 1 month I'm through Toya's lens, 1 month I'm through TAH photos, and it's like you're gonna lose track of, even though it's all the same thing and it's all the same person and it all means the same thing, people are gonna get uninterested and bored and forget who you are because you've not made yourself memorable. Because I've been doing this now for 6 years, maybe. And a big part of it is because I've kept the same logo, the same name, and the same branding across everything. I decided years ago, when I was a child, that pink was my favorite color. So So what? My website is all pink. My social medias are pink. Anything that is like on me, even my portfolios, my CVs, my resumes, everything has the same shade of pink going across it. So even if at a glance, visually, you associate that shade of pink with my branding, cool.
Yeah. I did that too where um I decided that green was my favorite color years and years and years ago. And I specifically chose an off-white green. Um, and actually that this branding started partially because, again, as I mentioned, not being able to read, I set up all of my documents in Google Docs. It used to be black pages, neon green words, but that's not very easy to read for a lot of other people. So it's now I set up all my documents. Yeah, it was actually Toya who was like, "Can't read this. Like, please,
I was like
change
reading
it."
like
Yes. So everyone thank Toya because otherwise I never would have changed my ways. But we changed it to an off-white green.
almost
And
like green.
yeah, and I set up all my documents like that now. I'm getting them ring bound. Like all pretty sometime this week. But my actual proper business plan is black pages with like that light off-white green text.
Mm.
But the other thing I did, and it worked somehow, is for my CV, when I did my name, I used letter frames and I dragged and dropped the silliest photos of me into all of the letters. And so it has like Jade McLeod at the top with like photos of my face that spell out the letters. It's weird, it's random, it's right at the top, it gets your attention, and then the whole document is a black page with green text. Um, I think exploring your personal branding as well as business branding, because a lot of people don't have their own business, but explore your personal branding. Who are you? How do you present yourself to the world? Because that does matter. Um, Even for social media, I am aware that if you look at my personal page, it's a little bit of a mess right now because there's something coming and the hinging of it is kind of messy. But even then, you'll notice that my profile picture has a green background and it has me with the butterfly clips and the crazy hair. Um, because that's who I am. It's not a character. It looks really dramatic, but it's not a character. I mean, people have associated me with glitter, and I find that kind of funny because the other night I was sitting there and I looked at my hands and I went, why am I literally like covered in glitter? I don't even know what I've touched. Um, I literally I was like, I simply am glitter. Or I don't know if anyone's seen the post, but we have a joke between a lot of friends of like, I'm the unk of this, I'm the unk of that, and so I've been named Glitter Unk, which thank you for that, by the way. But take that into consideration what your friends say about you, because the people who know you the best are the best people to sort of shape your branding. Um, and yeah, just I know a lot of people say it, and I know that not a lot of people actually take it into consideration. But the biggest advice I can give young people wanting to get into creative industries or music is just be yourself. People can tell when you're actually showing up as yourself versus trying to force yourself into a box you don't fit. Another thing is if you were talking about job experience, um, so for example, of course, I interview a lot of people with the magazine. If you start listing every name ever that you've ever worked with, it looks very braggy. I stick with a couple of local and a couple of big names. So I say the first one that blew up was Callum Hood. You know, the first one that got a lot of attention was Callum Hood. I went on to work with local names, and then I mentioned Ali Witten because I think he's very cool and he's getting a bit of attention. Then I mention a couple of artists that I've worked with who fit into groups that aren't commonly talked about. So, for example, I might discuss a couple of the females I've worked with. But if you list every person ever, it gets very braggy. I stick to three. I always go Callum Hood, I always go Ali Witten, and then I rotate between someone else, either a female or a minority group. And it's whoever was the most recent as of sending it through. Just do that because people do sort of get the vibe that it's been a bit braggy at times. On top of that, keep only what's relevant on there because for me, like I have the tiniest little bit of retail experience, but I've never gone anywhere with that. And like I have a couple of little food industry moments, but again, I've never really gone anywhere with that. So if someone was to be like, "Oh, what's your experience?" It's all social media, it's all my creative stuff. That's what you get. People notice when you're sort of kissing someone's behind. So don't do that. I
Mhm.
think talk about what this job means for your journey and what you could bring to this, to this environment. But I can tell I have gotten a lot of messages before from people who are trying to kiss butt, and I don't even open them because usually the subject line is also very kissing butt. And I'm like, if you reach out genuinely wanting advice, I'll open it. I'll give you my time.
Yeah. Off that, like you said about like rotating three names, like you do a big one, a medium-sized one, and then you rotate a minority, which is good. It shows that you're in rotation, but it also shows you have this big reach, and it also shows you have your eye on the ball with like what's up and coming. With me, with my photography, my kind of part of my like opening is always I photograph artists from pub basements to arenas because that just spans. I can do these teeny tiny 100 cap venues that are like damp and badly lit up to 20,000 cap venues that sell out some of the biggest bands in the world. And if people ask for examples of my work or like my creative portfolio, there's a couple of pages of photos, but with years and years worth of photography, I can only highlight certain bits. So I just pick my favorite photos and I make sure there's a woman, I make sure there's a person of color, I make sure there's a band, and I make sure there's a man because I want to show that I can photograph all of these things. And then I also make sure that there's some point and shoot photos and some professional photos and some from the back of the crowd when you get the wide shots and some from the photo pit where it's like close up and sweaty, just to show all of the diversity. But that will only ever be 10 to 12 photos. And then if people do ask who I photographed for, I get to say big things like I helped photograph the Busted versus McFly tour announcement. That's massive. I've photographed for McFly, I photographed for Zara Larsson, and then I get to say I photographed for bands like Car Park and Masterpiece who are doing these teeny tiny little venues, and people are like, "Who?" And I'm like, "Exactly."
Yeah.
You get to, if there's a way that you can kind of overall, and obviously when you're starting out, you're not going to be able to say that you've got Callum Hood and McFly and all of these like massive names under your belt, but if you can show that you can do this little local venue and this little local venue, and you can do this talk show and you can do this theatre show. Like it shows the diversity in what you can do, and it makes you more trustworthy, I guess, trustworthy and reliable, and people reach out to you for more opportunities. I photographed a wedding for Christ's sake just because of my experience in concert photography. Very unrelated things, but it was also my best friend, so cheaper. But she loves my concert photography, so she went, I trust you to take my wedding photos. And I went, that's crazy. But now I have a wedding on my website. So should anyone stumble across my website looking for a different type of photography, they can see that I do portraits, concerts, and weddings.
I mean, you think that's crazy. My parents had their wedding photos taken by a criminology photographer. So you never know. But then also, I would say don't count out little local events. Um, this year, it was actually pretty recently, I traveled to Karamea and I shot their Wearable Arts. And it is literally taking one person's trash and turning it into fashion. It was the most amazing show. I loved every second of it. Mum and I had an absolute blast. And some of those photos I've actually been able to submit to other potential things I might be doing related to fashion. You don't know. Like show up to the little places. Um, I took my camera to my brother's concerts that were literally just like in the little local place. And I've had people interested in that who are bigger names. So don't count out the little people, the little places. I've interviewed people who aren't well known, but then people who are more well known are like, "Oh, I really liked that angle. Like, I'd be willing to work with you." Never, ever, no matter how long you've been doing something, think that you're better than anything because you're not. You just aren't. And anyone who suddenly starts acting like they're better than something, this industry is very small. People notice that. People count you out. Um, Just don't do that. That's been this week's episode of The Professional Fan. Have a groovy week.